Joining us on this edition of the News Review, we have journalist, activist, and political analyst John Bosnich, who's joining us from Belgrade. Also, we have geopolitical analyst Daniel Patrick Welch, who's joining us from Boston. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let's start off with Mr. Bosnich in Belgrade. Give us right now your perspective on how the situation is transpiring with regards to Ukraine. A ceasefire was announced by Russia. Of course, that was rejected by Ukraine and its Western NATO backers, namely the United States. What's going on right now?
Well, this is a standard procedure on the side of Russia since the end of the Soviet Union to respect the Christian holiday and especially the birth of Jesus Christ. And there's nothing out of the usual on the part of President Putin's offer. On the receiving end of that offer, we see an immediate rejection from Ukraine and a more muted but also immediate rejection from America and its NATO military colonies. The reason there is a dual. Zelensky himself is neither Ukrainian Orthodox Christian nor Russian Orthodox Christian. Zelensky is, by his own declaration, Jewish, and so this date has no significance for him personally. Further, we know that Zelensky does not want to allow Russia to demonstrate its Christian roots on the battlefield and wants to draw Russia into further conflict. As for the United States, we know that the U.S. Constitution is officially atheist and that the United States is not a God-fearing country according to its own laws, having taken down any reference to God in many of the statues and monuments across the country over the past 10 years. So we have the situation where the Russian state leader is offering a truce and the other side unable to refuse the truce based on the fact that they don't follow the Christian religion, is saying that A, Russia is violating its own truce, which is apparently not the case, at least from the reporters I've been able to reach, and B, America is staying in the wings and just blank checking anything that Zelensky says. That's where we are today.
Daniel Patrick Welch, give us your perspective on the situation right now. Russia believes that the United States, namely the main NATO backer of Ukraine, does not want this conflict to end.
Yeah, I think that's exactly true. They don't want it to end, and they don't want any sort of break in their war because they gain from dragging Russia out. What they have done through the EU is exactly what they did through for the $7 billion that they stole from Afghanistan, from the Savak that they put in power in Iran, from the assets that they stole from Citgo in Venezuela. They have done this through Operation Gladio for 60 years. And this is just another ploy in the same thing. I don't know why people are having such a difficult thing to understand that these are Nazis, that this is part of Operation Gladio. What your previous guest just mentioned about Zelensky, Zelensky is an actor. He happens to be Jewish. He applied his own personal apology for that, for some reason, for the 10 years before this particular element of the war started. And he has supported Stepan Bandera. He has supported the Galinin division. It has been a Nazi thing going on in Ukraine since 1941. And the fact that it's still going on is just that, Putin is not crazy, but that he has been patient with his own people, with the Russians in the eastern part. Kherson, these are not Ukrainian cities. These are Russian cities, and they will continue to be part of Russia in the future. And Russia is just going to outweigh it. They have Commander Xi's collective cooperation. People are ready now for a different future. People are watching the rogue state of the United States, which takes other people's money and has its hegemonic rules adhered to by everybody that it cannot demand cooperation from. That's over.
Mr. Welch, with that in mind, where does that leave the prospects of this war ending through dialogue and negotiations?
Well,
okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
Now, this is for Mr. Welch, and then we're going to wrap it up with you, Mr. Bosnich.
They will continue to control the four oblasts that are now part of Russia and now have Russian troops on their land. They will still be part of Russia. That's not going to change. It's not going to go anywhere. They said that from the day the vote happened, and they said it from the coup in 1914. They have been saying it for the whole time, and that's not going to change. What is going to change is that the United States, through Clinton or Trump or any of these people, is going to have to give up their hegemony because they don't have the votes or the coverage to do so. The rest of the world is not gonna. Africa, South Asia, East Asia are not gonna give up anymore.
And same question to you, Mr. Bosnich, if you'd like to add anything to what our guest in Boston just said.
Well, I agree with your other guest, and I think that this is an example of overreach by NATO and by the United States in particular. They have attempted to crush the ability of Russia to defend itself by effectively invading Ukraine. Now, that sounds strange to some people, but in fact, NATO organized an undercover invasion of Ukraine from 2014 when the CIA spent $5 billion to overthrow the legally elected democratic government of Ukraine. That's how we got to where we are today. And Russia waited, attempted to have this situation end peacefully. There was no respite, and Russia finally had to intervene to at least save the Russian ethnic population of Ukraine that it was not going to allow NATO to kill through its mercenary army of actual Nazis. People call them neo-Nazis, but these are people wearing Nazi uniforms. So we're in a situation where Russia has intervened. Russia is attempting to bring peace. And if there is no peace available on the battlefield that could separate the two sides, I'm quite certain that Russia will have to eliminate completely the military forces based in Kiev.
All right, thanks a lot, gentlemen. Journalist, activist, and political analyst John Bosnich joining us from Belgrade, and geopolitical analyst Daniel Patrick Welch speaking to us from Boston. With that, it brings us to an end here on this edition of the News Review. But stick around, there's plenty more to come here on Press TV.